Hello and welcome to another video. In a recent video on the channel we looked at how I made this unique tree man build using just the parts that come in the box, no cross kit bashing, no converting required, and in this video we're going to apply the same concepts to entire units of models so that we end up with as close to 20 unique models versus 10 clones of another 10 models. We will be using blood letters of khorne in this example, which is a fairly limited range of options, so we'll need to get creative to succeed, and you can then apply this concept to any and all kits that Warhammer produce. To give a comparable example of this, do you ever zoom into your units in Total War and you're all excited about the battle, it all looks great, and then you get up close and you're like, hold on, this is just 3 dudes copy pasted. And I know it's not practical for them to all be unique, but it just breaks your immersion for you that little bit where you're like, oh yeah, I'm just playing a game here, and it takes you back one stage. And that's what we want to avoid in our army building, because there's no reason why each of your miniatures can't have their own identity and not be that copy paste of the same model design. And you will see that copy paste all over the box arts for Games Workshop's models. But let's get started. We have our sprues here for 2 sets of 10 blood letters, and the first things first in the process is to clip out absolutely everything from the sprues. I know sometimes you get extras or the instructions are quite specific to what parts go with what, so what you want to do is follow the instructions and group all of the parts for a single miniature in one area on your table. Don't glue them together, just create a pile for each of those parts for the model, and so you'll end up with 20 in this case, and 1 extra pile of just extra spare parts. And we do that so that we can map out our options and importantly see where we can utilize extra parts to add on to models or change them between each one. So here's all of mine split out like that, and right away doing this we can just see how much easier it is to see and map out that, okay, we've got 2 separate banner designs here, and I'm not accidentally following the instructions one by one and ended up using the same parts on 2 models where I could have separated them out, used different pieces and changed things around. So we also have that extra pile of bits here for additions and just being useful for us later in the video. The next step is to build all of the components that absolutely cannot be modified without heavy use of converting. So in this case, the body and legs of the kits are all identical, which leaves us each of the arms, the weapon loadout, and the head to play with and pose how we like. The rest of it will be sort of us cutting and changing those pieces to put together. You can see one model here on a custom base. That's actually a tutorial video I did recently, and it's all made out of leftover parts of sprue, so very interesting if you want to check that out. But instead of a unit filler, I'm actually going to use this as a base for one of the models, and instead I think I'm going to use one of those spare banners from the kit that we just saw and create a unit filler out of the banner. So we'll look at that process as well. So we've got our little production line here, and now this allows us to, to be creative. We can begin that creativity by dry fitting all the pieces, seeing how they will look together. So I can grab 2 of the arms, see how they pose together, keep swapping them out until I hit combinations that I like the best. Let's build our standard bearers then, and you always want to build your command models together and ensure everything is different about each one. These are the ones that are going to stand out the most. They've got the most key parts. And here we know we have 2 spare banners, so we've got 4 in total, so we can look to forage these for parts, stick them onto other models, use them as basing, do whatever we want with them. And this is where we can start to separate your miniatures the most from just the standard instructions and end up with something really unique. Since it seems we can only put the banner arm on one way, we're going to need a way to separate the poses. Otherwise, all we really get is 1 arm and 1 head in difference, which won't be a lot. In checking the other arms to see how they could look holding the banner for one of the models, what we could try doing is cutting off the hand of this arm and replacing it with the banner holding arm. In order to do this, we'll be sure to make sure that we have a spare arm to use so that we don't ruin one of the other models, and luckily in this case we do. I use a small saw blade for this purpose, and any type of cutting, your mileage may vary. Make sure you've got the right kind of blade that has small teeth that it can catch on models of this size. I tend to avoid clippers because they will warp the plastic versus a clean straight cut that we need for the joins. It can take some time, and don't be stupid like I am and cut towards your fingers. Just be patient with it, and we'll use the same process on the other hand here to get that hand off. And then I'm simply just going to sand them ever so slightly after I cut them to get them smooth. I'm going to keep dry fitting those pieces together before I glue them, and then just repeat that process of sanding until I get the best join that I can. With that, I've been able to glue the two parts together and create a new banner holding arm without too much hassle, and create a nice diversity between my standard bearer units. With one glued in the instructional pose and one with the new arm model that I put together, and making sure that one's having the banner icon instead of the flag, we can see how these two are now looking nothing like each other. And we've created a totally imbalanced model here. So I've put some MDF under the base to keep this one grounded. And that was enough. You could add some weight in other ways, like onto your basing using a rock or something like that. And that will solve that problem. I didn't care too much about being practical, so I went with just the pose that I thought looked cool. And then from this point, we can start dry fitting on the other arm options to see how we can continue to separate them out. Again, let's not accidentally give them the same sword arm pose. We can keep making it different. We'll do the same with the heads. Now let's tackle our unit champion. So just like that tree man video, I like to make silly weapons, and in this case I feel like giving him a dual bladed weapon. That'll look awesome, I think, and considering they all have free hands and no shields or things to hold in that other hand, I think it's going to look fine and realistic, and given he's a demon, he's going to be able to wield such a thing anyway. So again, making sure first I do have a spare sword and that I don't ruin another model by taking their sword instead. So I'm just doing some dry fitting to ensure that it's all going to be in the correct angle. I'm not going to cut into the base or anything like that. Back to cutting, and contrary to what I said earlier, given this was like a small edge piece, it's very thin, I could safely use the clippers without too much fear. Bigger parts, cut it for sure, like I'm now doing here with the next part of the hilt on the other blade. We will get that glued on and it's looking good. It's about as strong now as a Lumineth spear, but the rule of cool must prevail. And you could shorten the handle and have the tip of the hilt touching the hand slightly to get a second connection point if you feel like you're going to want that. I picked an arm that then made sense for the weapon. This arm is coming over to start wielding it with both hands, and I'm then just dry fitting the head to see what angle he should look at to give the best possible pose. So the angle of the head and the arm really is important for the motion of the model, and I avoid where possible to have too many models just looking directly forward. If we look at the box art for the bloodletters, they're all looking dead on, but to me, to make it look more like they're not just statues, each of them having their own mind, looking around, doing their own thing. Again, when you look at like, units in Total War, they're going to have these idle animations. They're not all just standing still looking forward, and that will be conveyed if you make your models in that fashion as well. So I had an interesting idea. With the sword I cut off earlier, I thought this is a good opportunity to use one of the spare banner icons to have my hornblower model holding this as some sort of small staff icon bearer. Really unique looking model now that we will again totally separate him from his counterpart and use up more of those spare parts, which I always love to do. And what's really awesome is those same sprue parts that I use in my unit filler making tutorial has perfectly fit into this slot on the back of the banner to make his little staff. So that was just a match made in heaven, quite lucky. I'm just going to cut off the excess of that, glue them together just like I was doing with the standards, and he is ready to go. So there we have my one sort of vanilla hornblower, and then we've got this wacky guy holding the icon, and he's looking great. And ultimately, like, maybe he looks better in the traditional pose, but just having one or two miniatures that just go a little bit off the rails is fine. It's going to help you create that, uniqueness to your army. I haven't glued him to the base because he's going on that custom one that I've made, and he's going to need to be painted separately before I can put him on. So to finish off my command, I'm going to cut off the top of the other flag standard, and I'm going to give that little icon to the other champion to hold. And then I found a spare skull from another kit and just simply glued that on. All nice and simple, but again, a bit of creativity goes a long way in just making these models a little bit individual. And I have not seen this type of setup on any bloodletters. These kits have been around for years. If I look on Google, there's just no one has done these kind of simple cutting and pasting, that they've posted online. So you will come together with pretty rare types of units when you follow this kind of process. A quick scan across the command units so you can see how they're all shaping up. And really, for the design of the rest of the models in this case, the process is going to be a bit simpler. So all we need to do is glue on one of the arms and group all of those models together that have that same arm pose. Then to ensure that we can make each of those models unique, we'll use a different head and a different alternate arm from each other, so you don't accidentally end up with two models that have the exact same pose with the same arms and heads, which could happen if you build them one by one or just follow the instructions. And there we go. So in the end, you're left with a really cool unit that you can be proud of and say is truly your own. And in the next video in this series, we're going to be looking at a non-standard paint scheme for Khorne demons. I've put my Khorne demons videos into a small playlist on the channel if you want to watch some of the others and continue to follow along with that series moving forward easily. So stick around with us, subscribe to see more on that and lots more videos that I have planned for the channel. But goodbye for now, and thanks for watching.